Imagine executing a simple digital transaction only to discover the processing fee costs 10 times more than the amount you are trying to send. During the peak of the 2021 digital asset bull run, this was not a hypothetical scenario, but the harsh daily reality for millions of users on the Ethereum network. Gas fees, the computational costs required to process transactions, skyrocketed to unprecedented levels, rendering the network virtually unusable for everyday participants. This bottleneck threatened to strangle the very decentralized revolution the platform had ignited. The technical challenge of scaling Ethereum without compromising its foundational security has become the defining engineering hurdle of the modern blockchain era, driving a massive wave of innovation aimed at saving the network from its own success. Explaining the sheer necessity of this engineering rescue mission requires a look at the architecture of the network itself. Ethereum was designed as a global, decentralized computer capable of executing smart contract codes that run exactly as programmed without any possibility of downtime, censorship, or third-party interference. This breakthrough enabled the birth of DeFi, or decentralized finance, a system that allows financial services like lending, borrowing, and trading to operate entirely without traditional banks. Suddenly, a global ecosystem of permissionless applications was born, attracting billions of dollars in capital and millions of active users. But that massive influx of users exposed a fundamental limitation inherent to the protocol's base layer. The network processes roughly 15 transactions per second, a hard limit dictated by a foundational concept known as the blockchain trilemma. Coined by industry pioneers, the trilemma states that a blockchain can only optimize for 2 of 3 core properties at any given time: decentralization, security, and scalability. The foundational architecture heavily prioritized decentralization and security, requiring thousands of independent nodes around the world to verify every single transaction. While this ensures robust protection against attacks, it inherently sacrifices speed and throughput. As demand for block space surged, the network transformed into a highly congested digital highway. Users were forced into a blind bidding war, paying exorbitant fees to miners just to have their transactions prioritized in the next block. This congestion was further exacerbated by the explosion of the NFT, or non-fungible token, a unique digital asset representing ownership of items like art, music, or virtual real estate on the blockchain. The rush to mint and trade these assets clogged the network entirely, pricing out retail participants and exposing the urgent need for a structural evolution. The obvious answer to many outside observers was simply to increase the block size or speed up the block times, allowing more data to be processed in each cycle. However, according to core developers, drastically increasing throughput at the base layer would require vastly more expensive hardware to run a validating node. This would effectively price out everyday participants and centralize control of the network into the hands of a few corporate entities. Compromising decentralization was entirely unacceptable, meaning the scaling solution had to come from somewhere else entirely. If the base layer could not be expanded outward without breaking its core principles, the only direction left to build was upward. This realization birthed the era of Layer 2 solutions, secondary frameworks built directly on top of the main chain. The premise is elegantly simple. Take the heavy computational lifting off the congested main network, process thousands of transactions in a separate, faster environment, and then submit a single compressed summary of those transactions back to the base layer. By doing this, these secondary networks inherit the ironclad security of the main chain while offering a fraction of the cost and exponentially faster speeds. The most successful and widely adopted iteration of this concept is known as a rollup. Rollups act exactly as their name suggests, rolling up hundreds of individual off-chain transactions into one single massive batch. Instead of base layer nodes verifying every single transfer of value, they only need to verify the final bundled data. This dramatically reduces the burden on the main network, dropping execution costs from tens of dollars to mere cents, all while maintaining the cryptographic guarantees that make the underlying system so valuable. Within this ecosystem, 2 distinct technological approaches emerge to dominate the landscape. The first, known as optimistic rollups, operates on a principle of assumed innocence. When an optimistic network submits a batch of transactions to the main chain, it assumes all the data is valid and true without providing immediate mathematical proof. To prevent malicious activity, these systems rely on a mechanism called a fraud proof. After a batch is submitted, there is a multi-day dispute window where any network participant can flag a suspicious transaction, calculate a mathematical proof of the fraud, and have the malicious actor financially penalized. While highly effective and relatively easy for developers to implement, the optimistic approach carries inherent friction. Because of the necessary dispute window, users looking to withdraw their funds back to the main layer often face waiting periods of up to 7 days. This delay creates a liquidity bottleneck for fast-moving traders and applications. The system relies heavily on game theory and economic incentives, trusting that there will always be honest watchdogs monitoring the network for fraudulent activity. But what if a network did not have to rely on trust, game theory, or waiting periods at all? This question led to the development of the second, far more mathematically complex scaling solution, ZK-rollups or zero-knowledge rollups. Instead of assuming transactions are valid, a ZK network generates a highly complex cryptographic proof for every single batch before it is submitted to the main chain. This mathematical proof guarantees, with absolute certainty, that all the transactions within the batch are legitimate, without actually revealing the specific data of the transactions themselves. The implications of this cryptographic breakthrough are staggering for digital economies. Because the main chain receives a verified mathematical proof, there is no need for a dispute window. Withdrawals to the base layer are nearly instantaneous. Furthermore, as network usage increases, the cost per transaction actually decreases because the computational cost of generating the proof is amortized across a larger number of users. The latest reports indicate that while zero-knowledge technology is significantly harder to build and deploy, it represents the ultimate endgame for blockchain scalability. The deployment of these advanced scaling networks has fundamentally transformed the Web3 landscape. By drastically lowering the barrier to entry, they have enabled the rise of microtransactions, high-frequency decentralized trading, and complex on-chain gaming ecosystems that were previously impossible. They have also empowered the DAO, or Decentralized Autonomous Organization, a community-led entity with no central authority, where rules and treasuries are encoded via smart contract. These decentralized organizations can now conduct thousands of governance votes and micropayments without draining their collective treasuries on execution fees. This scaling evolution stands in stark contrast to other major digital assets. Consider Bitcoin, the original cryptocurrency, which operates with a rigid, highly conservative monetary policy and a focus on being a pristine store of value. Its ecosystem experiences massive cyclical shifts driven by the halving, a pre-programmed event occurring roughly every 4 years that cuts the new supply of Bitcoin issued to miners in half. While Bitcoin focuses on absolute scarcity and security at the base layer, the second largest digital asset has chosen a path of dynamic, layered expansion to serve as the foundational infrastructure for a new digital internet. Today, the operational reality of the decentralized economy has shifted almost entirely to these secondary layers. The total value locked within these networks has surged into the billions, and on any given day, these scaling solutions process significantly more transactions than the base layer itself. The main chain is rapidly transitioning into a settlement layer, a highly secure, global anchor where the final proofs and ultimate truths of the secondary networks are permanently recorded. Yet, this layered future is not without its own set of critical hurdles. The proliferation of dozens of different scaling networks has fractured the ecosystem, trapping liquidity in siloed environments and complicating the user experience. Moving assets between an optimistic network and a zero-knowledge network often requires complex bridges, which have historically been vulnerable to sophisticated cyber attacks. Unlike monolithic alternative networks like Solana, which attempt to process everything on a single ultra-fast layer, the layered approach embraces modularity, but must now solve the urgent challenge of interoperability. The next great engineering frontier is creating seamless communication protocols that allow these diverse solutions to interact with one another invisibly. Ultimately, the technical challenge of scaling Ethereum is about much more than just lowering transaction costs. It is about building a robust, global infrastructure capable of supporting the next iteration of the internet. As Layer 2 solutions continue to mature, abstracting away the friction and complexity of cryptography, the underlying blockchain will fade into the background. Users will interact with decentralized applications, verifiable digital identities, and open financial protocols with the same seamless ease they expect from traditional web platforms today, completely unaware of the massive, layered cryptographic engines powering their digital lives.